education in Liberia in 1850. Acting upon this, President Roberts then, in December 1851, urged the legislature to pass an act in Liberia that would establish the Liberia College. Continue telling my story until it gets themselves sorted.
You can try the mic now. Dr. Taylor, just come and use this other mic and, you know. Proceed.
Okay. The cornerstone was laid by the Trustees of the Nation for Education in Liberia in 1858. They also financed that process. Liberia College in 1862 looked like that. Now, I'll give you a slight backstory. After the cornerstone was laid, there was quite a bit of confusion as to where the college would be located. There was some arguments from legislators who wanted the college to be located in a different part of Liberia called Clay Ashland. However, Cape Montserrado, which is where we are today, Montserrado County in Monrovia, won at the end of the day, and the cornerstone was laid. In 1893, this is what Liberia College looked like. After the cornerstones were laid in 1858 and the university began its operations in 1861, there was a problem with getting students because only one person showed up in February 1862 to enter the college then. He had to be held back and for the next year, as there was a need to have more persons in the college. The first faculty of Liberia College were three very important gentlemen. Dr. Joseph Jenkins Roberts, who was in the finishing time of his presidency, became the professor of Jurisprudence and International Law. Reverend Alexander Cromwell was teaching intellectual and moral philosophy of the English language and literature. Professor Edward W. Blyting was teaching Greek and Latin language and mathematics. What's this guy doing? As you can see, Liberia College in 1893 had a few students. We also note that between the years of 1866 to 1902, there were only 10 graduates of Liberia College. It was not until around 1881 that women were finally allowed to enroll in the preparatory department of Liberia College. It so happened that this was the far-sightedness of Professor Dr. Wilmot Blyting that actually led to that. Now, I will take you very quickly to some of the past presidents of Liberia College. We have Dr. Joseph Jenkins Roberts, the first, who was the first president. We had Reverend Dr. James W. Piney, Dr. Edward Wilmot Blyting, and there's something significant about him. He became a Pan-Africanist. He was born in the Danish West Indies. He taught at schools in Sierra Leone, and he is currently buried there. He was very far-sighted and, to a large extent, considered the importance of women in education. We then had Professor Martin Freeman, who was the first black president of a university in the United States, not the Liberia College. We then have Dr. Garrison Wilmot Gibson, who also served as the president of Liberia previously, before he became president of the University of the Liberia College. We had then Orator F. Coke, and then Dr. Garrison Wilmot Gibson again had another tenure as president of Liberia College. Professor Arthur Barclay then succeeded him, but only in an acting capacity, followed by Reverend Dr. Robert B. Richardson. And then we had Honorable James Jenkins Dawson, who happens to currently have a hospital in Liberia named after him. He was very significant in contributing to moral and legal issues and a lot of issues around ensuring that how the people of Liberia should respect the rule of law. After several presidents of Liberia College, in fact, up until during the period of World War II, the president who led Liberia College he in fact was the longest serving president of the college. He led the country during a very significant and turbulent period. And he led college in 1850. Okay. Ward, T. Ebenezer Ward, very significant, like I said, a very significant period. He served the Liberia College up until during the period of President William D. Tubman, who by this time felt that Liberia was beginning to improve economically, and they at this time could take on some of the responsibility of financing the college. Throughout its history, from its inception, Liberia College was financed by the initial group that started it, the Trustees of the nation for education in Liberia. They had been very significant in providing the financing throughout that period. So in 1951, President William D. Tubman, being quite far-sighted as he was, and recognizing how important it was for Liberia to have its own educational system, especially for higher education, he then tabled an act in 1951 for the creation of the University of Liberia. The University of Liberia, therefore, can trace its origin as a university back to that year. And of course, the motto for that university became Lux in Tenebris, which is light in darkness. And indeed, this college, which had now become the University of Liberia, was a light in the darkness of not just Liberia, but Africa, Black Africa, as this university contributed to the freedom and emancipation of many African nations in this part of the world. Currently, the university has 4 campuses. Our Flex State campus is Capitol Hill. We also have Fendel campus, which is a massive property, and where, as Dr. Nelson mentioned, we are hoping to expand to a university city. There is also the AME Dogliotti College of Medicine, which is now called the College of Health Sciences. And then our 4th campus is the David A. Strauss St. J. campus, which is located in Cape Mount County. There is something significant that I'd like to mention. On the campus, the Capitol Hill campus of the University of Liberia, there is a bell that is dated back to the 1800s. And at that time, this bell was situated in Mambam Point, where the original Liberia College was located. That particular college location, unfortunately, it got burned down. This bell that you see up there was a relic of that time. It used to be the bell that would ring to summon the students to come to class. So it's quite a significant bell, and we're hoping at some point to have this bell restored in a proper historical context provided. The current president of the University of Liberia, therefore, the first was Dr. J. Max Bond. Then there was Dr. Kermit C. Smith. There was Dr. Rushford Weeks, who was the first Liberian born and who became president of the University of Liberia. We had Dr. Albertus Huff, who served 1972 to 1975, followed by Dr. J. Bernard Blunt. Very significantly, the first woman, Dr. Mary Antoinette Brown Sherman, served as president of the University of Liberia between 1978 and 1984. A very significant period as well, because during that period, Liberia experienced its first coup d'etat. And not only was Dr. Brown Sherman the first female president of the University of Liberia, she was also the first female president of an African university. Liberia, over the period, and has had leaders from this very university. Many renowned leaders, from presidents to historians to bankers, have walked through the walls of the University of Liberia. I was one of those that actually graduated from the University of Liberia many years ago. So, as Dr. Nelson very eloquently pointed out, there are a lot of opportunities to expand this great university. As we move from this point, we have to begin to think on where we want to see education, higher education for this country. The University of Liberia, having been the first in this country that led the way and trained our leaders and trained members of other countries, leaders of other countries, we hope to see a major advancement in the next 10 years. We look forward to the importance of the use of STEM, which is the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, to get us to a point where we begin to develop and become innovative, to work and direct our knowledge, to create things, and becoming a focal point of knowledge in the Republic of Liberia, and by extension, Africa. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I do apologize for the glitch in technology, and I thank you for your indulgence, but please be patient and please join us as we work towards making this university the light in the darkness, a light that will guide us, a light that will take its place, that will lead us to a better Liberia. Thank you.
We've come from. I mean, there were challenges, certainly, and there will be challenges, but our job is to address those challenges as we build this university, making it more affordable for our students, one of great quality. Dr. Tiller, as she was making her presentation, said she was a student at the university in the 80s during the presidency of Dr. Mary Anthony Brown Sherman. I was a student in the post-war, so we have two categories of students now, two generations. Those who went to the University of Liberia pre-war, people like Dr. Tiller. We were all excited, thinking about coming to the university. By the time we grew up, there was a war. And in 1990, the university did not give entrance. They did not give entrance 92, 91, 93, 94. So a whole generation of Liberians who came of age prior to the war had to wait for almost 5 years. And then finally the university, after so many years of waiting, decided that it would give its first entrance. In 1995, you can imagine, after 5 years of successful graduations, high school graduates. So when we took that entrance, there were more than 20,000 students who wanted to enroll in that university. And we enrolled in 1995 under the presidency of Dr. Patrick Ellen Sayam. So every student has their presidency. So her was Mary Anthony Brown Sherman. Mine was Dr. Patrick Ellen Sayam. If you ask all the alumni here, they will tell you who their president was. Dr. Julia Nelson, who was the president? Anthony, I see. So the Anthony Brown Sherman class now is leading. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, talking about famous members of our alumni community, it's my pleasure to call on an older member of the distinguished alumni community of the University of Liberia. I don't like to talk about the time he was here as a student. It's so long, but he has his fond memories as well. And in so doing, I'm pleased to call on the distinguished Vice President for and Research, Dr. Jonathan C. Taylor, who will do for us the introduction of Dr. Molifi Kete Asante, our guest speaker. So Dr. Taylor will tell you the year he graduated and which dorm he stayed in before he makes his comment.
Which dorm did I live in? I think quite a few of us here lived in Simon Greenleaf Hall. I remember that very clearly. In fact, we were the first group of students that lived in that dormitory in 1969. Thank you. Honorable Matthew Zaza, Chairman of the Board, Dr. Nelson, the President, and Mrs. Nelson, and all of our distinguished guests, diplomatic corps, and all of our leaders here, the academic community. Let me ask your kind indulgence to stand on a existing protocol as I say good morning to all. Humans have been forced to leave their homeland throughout history. For people of African descent, this diaspora began by at least the 16th century and resulted in the dispersion of millions of African-descended people in Asia, Europe, and the Americas. The most documented African diaspora occurred from about the 1500s to the mid-1800s and is called the Transatlantic slave trade. It involved the forced embarkation of approximately 12 million captives from Africa to the Americas, that's North America, South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. The 10 million that survived the disease-ridden and harrowing slave ships would later produce principally sugar, cotton, and coffee under one of the most dehumanizing slave regime in the world at the time. Today, their descendants comprise largely of large segments of the national populations in the United States and Brazil, two of the world's leading economies. In addition, the former powerful transatlantic slave trade is being succeeded by vast throngs from the relatively poorer South to areas in the global North, areas that are richer and more democratically stable. The overall objective of the University of Liberia Center for Diaspora and Migration Studies is to provide an analytical approach to understanding these migrations, the African diaspora, as well as the unfolding global movements of people. Liberia's ongoing 2022 bicentennial suggests that a republic is a probable microcosm of both of these strands. Many of those who have joining here today to commemorate the 1822 arrival of free blacks also fled political violence in Liberia. In other words, the quote and unquote return being commemorated comprises descendants from the old Kafal slavery as well as present-day so-called voluntary migrants. Last year, just about the time when the University of Liberia's cabinet was deliberating the establishment of a research center to study the issue of the Liberian diaspora as part of its contribution to the bicentennial celebrations, we participated in an international diaspora conference hosted by the African Union and the Association of African Universities. Our guest speaker today was a facilitator at that gathering. His passion for the African diaspora issues in many ways helped spur us on to this particular day we celebrate. We are pleased that Dr. Molefi Keti Asante could join us here today for the launching of the Center for Diaspora and Migration Studies as the newest academic unit of the University of Liberia. Molefi Keti Asante is professor and chair, Department of Africology at Temple University in Philadelphia, the United States of America. He is the president of the Molefi Asante Institute for Afrocentric Studies, Asante was an honorary professor at Zhejiang University, Hangzhou, China, and is professor extraordinarius at the University of South Africa. He is the founding and current editor, Journal of Black Studies, and the first director of UCLA's Center for Afro-American Studies. Asante, often called the most prolific African-American scholar, is the author of 97 books. Among the most recent are Being Human Being, Transforming the Race Discourse, The Perilous Center, or When Will the Center for Africa Hold?, Radical Insurgencies, The History of Africa, 3rd edition, An Afrocentric Pan-Africanist Vision, The African American People, A Global History, Erasing Racism, The Survival of the American Nation, Revolutionary Pedagogy, African American History, A Journey of Liberation, Facing South to Africa, and the memoir As I Run Towards Africa. Asante has published more than 500 articles and is considered one of the most quoted living African authors, as well as one of the most distinguished thinkers in the African world. He has been recognized as one of the 10 most widely cited African scholars and one of the most influential leaders in education. He received his PhD from the University of California, UCLA, at the age of 26 and was appointed a full professor at the age of 30 at the State University of New York at Buffalo. At Temple University, where he now serves, he created the first PhD program in African American Studies in 1988. He has directed more than 140 PhD dissertations, making him the top producer of doctorate students among African American scholars. He is the founder of the theory of Afrocentricity, the Chick Anta-Diop's Conference, and the think tank, the Molefi Kente Asante Institute for Afrocentric Studies in Philadelphia, the United States. Asante was born in Valdosta, Georgia, USA. He is one of 16 children. He is married to Anna Yanega, an African Costa Rican. He has 3 children, Mario, Eka, and NK Jr., and 6 grandchildren. Asante is a poet, a novelist, a dramatist, and a painter. He works on African language, African history, multiculturalism, and human communication and philosophy, and have been cited and reviewed by journals such as the Africological Perspective, the Quarterly Journal of Speech, the Journal of Black Studies, the Black Scholar, the Journal of Communication, the International Journal of African Renaissance, the Journal of Pan-African Thought, and the ordinary reader called him one of the 100 leading thinkers in America. Asante has appeared on numerous television and social media programs in Africa, Asia, North America, and South America, and Europe. He has received many awards and honors for scholarship and political and community activism. He regularly consults with heads of state in Africa and has become one of the most popular lecturers on issues of Africa today. He served on the Thabo Mbeki African School of Leadership at the University of South Africa. Dr. Asante's writings are in Russian, Spanish, Kiswahili, Portuguese, French, Hungarian, and Japanese. He was the president of the civil rights organization, the Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee at UCLA's chapter in the 1960s. Traditional titles have been conferred upon him in both the Republic of Ghana and the Republic of Mali. Asante has received honorary doctorates and awards from several institutions, including Pepperdine University, the University of New Haven, Sojourner Douglas College, and many others in Africa and other places. His students have included many African scholars, including our own Dr. Edward Wakayon and Dr. Sir Abdullah Vandi. He is a series editor of Routledge African Studies, History, Economic, Society, and series for Anthem Press for Africana Studies, especially in the areas of ethics, theory, practice, and history. And let me say, and much more. Therefore, Mr. President, distinguished guests, it is my pleasure to present to you Professor Molefi Kete Asante, our guest speaker today.
I should come to Liberia just to be introduced. His Excellency, please be seated. His Excellency Dr. George Manowe, President, Republic of Liberia, and visitor to the university. Madam Claire Maria Weah, First Lady, Republic of Liberia. Honorable Dr. Jewel Howard Taylor, Vice President, Republic of Liberia. Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, former President, Republic of Liberia. Ambassador Joseph Boakai, former Vice President, Republic of Liberia. Honorable Dr. Boffa Chamber, Speaker and members of the House of Representatives. Honorable Albert Chia, President pro tempore, and members of the Liberian Senate. His Honor Francis Corporal, Chief Justice, Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of Liberia, and members of the Judiciary. Honorable Matthew Zarza, Chairman of the Board of Trustees, University of Liberia, the Dean and members of the Cabinet, the Chief of Staff, and gallant men and women of the armed forces of Liberia and other members of the security apparatus. Professor Dr. Julius Julikan Sawola Nelson Jr., President of the University of Liberia and the University of Liberia family, and the great orator he is. Excellency, the Doyen and members of the diplomatic and consular corps, including ambassadors who are here from many states, including my own United States, excellencies of all nations, Professor Dr. Forde Sa, Vice Chancellor of the University of Sierra Leone, the special representatives of the United Nations, members of the disabled community, and all vulnerable and minority groups, prelates, clergy, heads, and members of religious institutions, kings, elders, and traditional leaders. I don't use the word chief. That's just an Afrocentric expression. Heads of tertiary and higher educational institutions, members of the Fourth Estate, distinguished guests, students, Dr. Agnes Reeves Taylor, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have come on this February 15th, 2022, to celebrate and meditate with you on your bicentennial festivities and the future of this great country, especially in terms of education. I bring you greetings from the brothers and sisters in Philadelphia, an old African city, the seat of much activity to improve America. Fofi Jabate, the leader of ACANA, our Philadelphia Association for Africans, told me to make sure that I gave you his special blessings. Philadelphia is the source of many innovations and initiatives. Many of you trace your history to Philadelphia. Africa has given us many ideas, and one of them is the idea of Afrocentricity, an idea that I actually got from an expression made by Kwame Nkrumah in 1961, where he said to W.E.B. Du Bois, who was one of the greatest African intellectuals of the 20th century. I always say that the greatest intellectual of the 20th century was Sheikh Anta Diop. But the second greatest was W.B. Du Bois. And Kwame Nkrumah said to him, I want you to start and develop an Encyclopedia Africana. But I want it to be Afrocentric. I don't want it to be Eurocentric. It was a profound statement. And I took that statement and developed the idea of Afrocentricity, which has become, over the years, one of the most dominant ideas in universities throughout the continent. And I give special credit to the University of South Africa under the leadership of one of the great vice chancellors of that university, Manla Makanya, who asked me to come 4 years ago to the university and talk to every faculty in the university about how to re-signify and reorganize and reorient the training of professionals in the South African University. It was one of the great moments in education in Africa, and I just wanted to give honor to that. Afrocentricity as an African concept was born in Buffalo as a full-blown theory. Buffalo is in New York in 1980. But it took root in Philadelphia and has spread around Africa and the world. As you've heard, in Japan and Russia, in the UK and China, and other places, Brazil, Colombia, have latched on to this idea. And I think it is a very simple idea, and I will talk about it in regards to the launching of this great center that you have in mind. But I come first to you in the name of Ptah, in the name of Aten, in the name of Ra, and in the name of Amen, the oldest names for God in the history of the world. These are African names of God. I pour libations and give thanks to the names of Gabriel Bacchus Matthew and Antoinette Brown Sherman, the mother of the Revolution. And I praise the brilliant men and women who have led you this far. You have many men and women who shall live forever. Your ancestors' names ring with the freedom and independence of other nations on this continent. I am the sum of my readings, my experiences, and my influences, and I humbly bring this message to you today. I bow before the various heroes and heroines who have insisted on maintaining democracy, although we know that of all political systems, democracy's fragility is dependent upon vigilance. You represent a powerful example of hope, integration of peoples, and the vision of a new age of Pan-African democracy. I am here to testify to your overwhelming sense of the love of freedom, traditions, and good character. Two of my former students, as you have heard, Professor Dr. Edward Lama Wankiya, Director of Higher Education, and Professor Sir Abdullah Vandi, a former minister, are among those who have made international history as representatives of this nation. They were introduced to my earliest thinking about Afrocentricity and knowledge. And so they knew the books, the Afrocentric Manifesto. They knew Kemet, Afrocentricity and Knowledge, and they knew the Afrocentric idea. It has become the most important way that we can reinterpret the understanding of our narratives of history, wherever we are in the world as African people. Of course, the connection between Liberia and the United States is cultural, political, and social, and ideological. So I'm sure that the idea behind Afrocentricity is here as well. It is a simple idea, controversial to those who deem the interrogation of African cultures aberrant. But Afrocentricity is extremely resilient. There is nothing more important for you as lessons than our own historical experiences, ancient and modern. Africa owes no debt to any people. All debts have been paid. Even sometimes they have been paid when they were not even made by us. Afrocentricity is the idea that African people and interests must be seen as subjects, as actors, as doers in all areas of life. We are not merely receivers, spectators, and onlookers to history. We are makers of history. This is what Dr. Reeves Taylor just showed us. All narratives of ethics, law, religion, language, architecture, and sciences, values, must take the centrality of the African experience into consideration. What have we thought about this or that? Who are we collectively? I was born in Valdosta, Georgia, in the deep south of the United States, with all of the baggage that such a birth came with in the 1940s. I was given the name Arthur Smith, named after my father. After attending the University of California, Los Angeles, receiving the doctorate degree, I wanted to travel to the continent. After all, it is the land of my origin. One of the 6 nations I visited was Ghana, and that is where the Asante Hene, Opoku Wari II, declared that my name should be Kofi Kete Asante. He asked me, what day were you born on? And I told him. And he said, well, then, if you were born on Friday, then your name should be Kofi. And then he said, but you're not a Britisher. You're not an English person. Why do you have an English name? This is the interrogation that Opoku Wari II gave to me. And then he said, okay, your name really should be Kete Asante. You love the royal music of the drums, and you love this, popular name, so you're Asante. And I later added Molefe. out of solidarity, it's a Sotho name from South Africa, out of solidarity with the South African struggle for liberation. It means one who keeps the traditions. And that's not my fault. It means one who keeps the traditions. So Molefe, Kete Asante. And the interesting thing here is that this name, Molefe, Kete Asante, I was really nervous about it because I said, my father, what would my father say? But in 1972, when I went to my father and I told him this, my father said, if I had known an African name, I would have named you an African name. I would have even given myself an African name. I am happy for you. It was one of the most encouraging things he had ever said to me, because it was the beginning of my examination of the narratives of Africa. Who are we? What traditions do we honor? Whose ancestors' names do we call? These were the questions. So it is true that I was later made the Chidomhini of Tafo, Nana Okru Asante Piasa, in the state of Achim in Ghana. It is true that the Amaru of Gao, Hasimi Maiga, made me a wanadu in his court. But I later discovered, this is how science is, I later discovered through DNA that my immediate ancestors originated not in Ghana or in Mali, but actually among the Yoruba in Nigeria and among the Nubians in Sudan. So I'm like, whoa, what is this? Here's a guy carrying a name around, a South African and a Ghanaian name, but actually his traditions are in Nigeria and Sudan. So it's a whole different story. So I always tell people I am a true Pan-African. I lived in Zimbabwe. I trained the first set of Zimbabwean journalists after the second Chimurenga. And like so many of you, my history is complex. Some of it known, some of it remains unknown. But one truth I know, Africa is the origin of humanity. And my aim is always to examine the experiences of this continent. That is the only way to a true Pan-Africanism. It is the only way to humanity. Today, I challenge Liberia to assume its rightful place as the modern assertion of a true integration of this continent in a Pan-African way. You do not define your history. Your history defines you. Our task is to make a new future grounded on African ideas and values. We have often been betrayed by believing that Europe is teacher and we are pupil. On the plane over here, I heard a white American sounding every bit like he was a leader of a plantation. His language, his attitude, his ignorance was palpable. And as we do, we just looked at him and let him demonstrate his Southern American arrogance. Most of us in line in Paris for the flight ignored him. And I said to myself that even coming to Africa, he carries with him the same notion of white supremacy that I found that I left in the United States of America. What is this? How can you do this? Doesn't he understand humanity? That's why I say we have often been betrayed. Pan-Africanism is not merely a theory and a slogan. It's a practice. The African Renaissance is a concrete practice of Pan-Africanism. What country is best prepared by experience and history to lead such a renaissance for the continent? It's prepared also, I believe, by its ideological and security and economic relations with the United States to do this. I'm giving this challenge to Liberia. You must make here the diasporic pivot and claim for Africa all its contributions and achievements. No nation is more qualified than you to become the striker for African unity. To do this, we need radical thinking in the sense that we must question ideas that come to us without paying homage to our own ancestors. Let me say this again. If they don't pay homage to your ancestors, you don't need to pay homage to theirs. If the ideas come to you and they have not come from the interrogation of your own history and culture, question it. Who and what are the traditions of beauty? What is the meaning of the good? What are the most important traits of ethics? A young lady said to me at Achimota School in Accra, Ghana, she said, Dr. Asante, if the white people had not come to Ghana, would we be civilized? She was 16 years old. I said, before the white people came, we didn't even have to lock our doors. Now that we got the white people's knowledge and understanding and religion, we have to lock our doors and put fences and walls up. What is civilization? Who defines these things? My question has always been, who said so and why? Did science come from the Greeks? Who said so? Homer was the first Greek that made sense, and he lived around 800 years before Christ. He wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, but they were written after he came here to Africa. 2,000 years before Homer, there was Imhotep. Now, do your children know Imhotep? He was a black man, an African, the first genius in the world, the first architect, the first physician to study diseases and to provide therapies. Imhotep was the builder of the first pyramid. Science, look, science and knowledge is here for us to study and to interrogate. The pyramids of the Nile River Valley are the largest and earliest readable archives in the world. They're in Africa. They're not in Europe. They're not in America. They're not in Asia. They're in Africa. The largest and earliest readable archives. Science is here, the liberal arts, rituals, ceremonies, the names of the gods, the calendar, chemistry, and astronomy, all in the pyramids. This is 2,500 years before Jesus Christ. This is 3,100 years before Muhammad. 2,500 years before Jesus Christ, which is longer than we have lived this side of Jesus Christ. 2,500 years Jesus could look back to the continent of Africa and say those Africans built some old monuments 2,500 years before Christ. Were we waiting around for the Greeks? Were we waiting around for anybody? No. It's already there. There are 106 pyramids in Egypt, which was black, and the further back you go, the blacker it is. There are 255 pyramids in Sudan. This is a resource. Why do I want to start with the Greeks? Well, why should education start with the Greeks? Why should that be a Greek sitting at the door of every discipline? But we have to interrogate. You here in this fabled country, through a history of courage and devotion to the idea of a universal African community, have demonstrated more than most nations the acceptance of people from other communities. It is no wonder that the University of Liberia has become the fertile ground for the idea of African diaspora studies. This pivot will allow you to advance 1,000-fold and bring many other people and nations to honor the work you will do. I am truly pleased to be able to examine the faces of those who have had the courage to return to the study of the children of the motherland. Your children are everywhere. Liberia itself is not a static idea. It is a dynamic idea, one that evolves every year and becomes more and more the country that opens its hands to all Africans. This is your history. This is your destiny. 200 years of Pan-African community through trials and tribulations, yes, right here on the powerful bicep of Africa. You are now launching a truly Afrocentric initiative. What a glorious history and sentinel country you have become. Liberia has had recently more than 20 years of unbroken peace. You have committed yourself to the rule of law. Actually, President Weir, His Excellency, made this pledge to the United Nations and has kept his promise in honor of the press, the collective association, speech freedom, and the rule of law. When he spoke to the United Nations, he was clear about his commitments to freedom. That is the true Liberian spirit, I believe. Let us also be true to ancient achievements of Africa itself. I saw in Nzalo Ilanga, in the province of Mpumalanga in South Africa, the place of the rising sun, where over 100,000 years ago, our ancestors on this continent stood stones up in honor of their ancestors. Thousands of stone structures. They say it is the first structural creation by humans. President Nelson, I come to tell you that you know what you know, and that is that we must maintain vigilance and encourage democracy, individual and collective rights, and the rule of law. The University of Liberia sits at the front steps of our adventure in African diaspora studies. It is the respect for the rule of law that will enlarge opportunities and freedom and make this proposal for a program in migration and African diasporal studies practical, real, and beneficial for the nation and the world. It must not be based on ethnicity, region, and creed, but on the collective sense of what is African. Of course, it is not a closed system, and we can always debate the principles of Africanity. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that some laws were unjust, and that we must accept even the punishment that comes with breaking those unjust laws because it shows respect for law. Now, a lot of people question that. But he said, you work to change the laws. That is why he and his followers went to jail. It is a noble thing to accept law, even though it is a poisonous idea to make bad laws just to oppress people. Here, in this enclave of liberty, you are now perched on top of academic possibilities with an eternal future. I'm here to encourage you to model the best tradition and practices of Pan-Africanism in education. Ask the hard questions about the future and about our past. Resolve to connect, not to separate. You can and you must rise above ethnicity, protect the smallest and least protected groups, honor them, and you honor the meaning of Liberia. Why are there tens of millions of Africans, the cities in India? What nations did Chang He of China trade with on the east coast of Africa in the 14th century? What is the model for the so-called secret societies? We know they are not secret societies because we know them. But they are societies of secrets. Actually, they contain the text, the poems, the drama, the healing rituals, the information, and the narratives of our existence. Let me give you some facts. The oldest hominin fossil found in the world is found here on this continent. Sahelanthropus chadensis. 7.2 million years ago. Imagine this, a fossil with bones turned to stone, found in Chad, and they date it to 7.2 million years, the oldest such fossil of a human-like creature ever found. It was found only in one continent, Africa. That is the truth. Think about that. But there's something else to think about. Homo sapiens, anatomically modern humans like us, arose about 300,000 years ago on one continent, Africa. There are no Homo sapiens rising in America or in Europe or Asia or South America 300,000 years ago. They're rising in Africa, Homo sapiens. So of the 7 billion people in the world today, all of those people have African DNA from one African woman. Think about that. When you meditate on that, there are a lot of questions that you have, and I know you have them. I had them too. But all humans have DNA from Africa. This is the most diverse continent in the world. The nearly 2 billion people on this continent represent more diversity than the rest of the world combined. Here, on this continent. Now here's the thing. The earliest Africans, the earliest humans, who were the earliest Africans? All the people in the world were black until 70,000 years ago. There were no other people. 3/4 of the time that Homo sapiens have spent on the earth was spent in Africa before migration out of Africa. Think about that. So what did we learn? We had to learn what was edible and what was not. Otherwise, nobody would exist. Everybody would be dead. Ate poison food. You know what I mean? We had to learn that. You had to learn shelter. You had to learn how to cross a river. You had to learn relationships between people. You had to know your children, so you had to name them. You wanted to know something about astronomy and the stars that you saw at night, and so you had to give names to the stars and planets. Africans did that. The first people to speak the name of the divine were Africans. There was nobody else. There were no Asians, no Europeans, no Arabs. Africans spoke the name of God before anybody. Think about that. I want you to think deeply. I do that as a normal practice. It's important for us as African people to do that. And if we're going to start a center for migration and diaspora studies, think of the diaspora. Professor Taylor, when he was introducing me, I was thinking about how we were talking after the African Universities conference and began to get these ideas that sometimes we don't know all that we need to know about ourselves. And that's why I ask the questions I ask. Africans knew diversity more than anybody else. We knew that people were short and some were tall. We knew that some people were lighter than others, some were darker than others. We knew that some people spoke different languages. But you know what? We never ranked people on the basis of their shortness or their color. It was not African. It was not an African idea. Listen to this, because this is central. Africans knew that humans were diverse. But because you had brown eyes and someone else had black eyes, we didn't say you were different or better than that person. We knew that. You were human. Humans come in many different colors and with different hair and eyes and all. We knew that. We didn't rank it. Listen to this. The ranking of diversity is something that came with the Arabs and the Europeans. Listen to it. If you got blonde hair, you're better than the person who has black hair. This wasn't an African idea. We didn't come up with anything like that. We knew everybody was human. This is the deepest part of this. And it may have existed even before the Europeans and the Arabs. It may have come with the ancient religion of Hindu, with the Varnas, the caste system, an invasion of the Indo-Europeans into India, and the subduing of the darker Indians, and the creating of a religion based on caste. Africans didn't do that. It never existed. It may have come with Judaism, with the stories of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and the children of Ham. That whole interpretation, a religious idea. But it is not African. There have been aberrations in Africa in more recent times, but the earliest values of Africa were founded upon the ethics of Ma'at, the oldest ethic in the world. Let me congratulate you for setting the model for African global studies with the Center for Migration and the Diaspora. Traditions come from doing something. And what what you do will set the path for others to follow. These should be the key principles. These are the key principles of such a center. The first migration was African. Homo sapiens exploring. Homo sapiens rising somewhere in East Africa and then setting out to explore. I wonder what's on the other side of that hill. I wonder what's on the other side of that river. I wonder what's on the other side of that forest. Humans exploring. That's the beginning of it. Africans exploring. And then, of course, Africans crossing into other continents. That's the first migration of Homo sapiens. Because Homo sapiens migrated in Africa before Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa. And all Homo sapiens didn't leave Africa. Sometimes people say, well, your Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa like everybody left. No, we're still here. So here's that's a principle. You start at the beginning. Chronology is important. Begin with the beginning. The first migration is a migration of the people of Homo sapiens on the continent of Africa exploring. The first explorers and the first adventurers were those people. That's one. Second one. The first nation in the world was African. Kemet. Kemet, some of you know, is the African name for the country that is today called Egypt. But Egypt is not an African name. Egypt is a Greek name. Egyptos is what the Greeks named the African country Kemet. Remember that. Kemet. Kemet was a nation brought together under the power of a king by the name of Menes. Menes, what he did, which was the first nation, he brought 42 different ethnic groups together, gave them the same language and the same symbols, integrating all their symbols and ideas and values and ethics into one. And we got the nation of Kemet. This is the beginning. So the first nation in the world, there's no nation before this. This is around 3,400 years before Christ. 3,400 years. There's no United States of America then. There's no Germany. There's no Russia. There's no Japan. 3,400 years before Jesus Christ, a black king brings together 42 ethnic groups, and he becomes the Pharaoh, which the Jews call Pharaoh, and we follow that today in English. But the actual language says Pharaoh, the great house. This is an understanding of what the center has to do. The center has to be critical. It has to say, okay, the first migration, the first nation, the first ancient civilizations were African. Kemet, Kush, Meroe, Nubia, Aksum. The first notion of the religion of mother and child was actually Isis and Horus in the Greek, but in the African we say Oset and Heru. The first divine trinity was Osar, Oset, and Heru, often called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. This was African. The first resurrection was when Osiris was stood up along the side of the river Nile, and the people said, he is the resurrected one. These are the beginnings of all this. Things don't just start, they start from somewhere. Then another principle of this center would be what we study. We study early and classical studies. Because if we study the further back we go, we know, for example, that we get the Arabs coming to Egypt in 639, this era, under the general El-Az. You know why El-Az came to Egypt from Arabia after having conquered Jerusalem? Because the black people invited him to come. And you know why the black people invited him to come? Because they were under the control of the Romans. And they said, come over and help us throw off the Romans. And when El-Az brought his army into Africa, they decided that, this Nile Valley is a good place to stay. And that's why they stayed. And they multiplied. So when you go to Egypt today, and I've been to Egypt about 17 times, when you go to Egypt today and you see Egypt is not what it was before 639, you see. It's the same as when you go to the United States of America. I live in Philadelphia. But the people who lived in Philadelphia before the Europeans came and before the Africans came were the Little P. The Little P people were there thousands of years ago. So it's not the same. It doesn't look the same. They're not even the same people. The composition of people have changed. And that's what happened to Egypt. Except, fortunately, in Egypt, there are still black communities. And I go to these communities. I go to Elephantine and I talk to the people. That's how I get my knowledge, talking to the local people. And the local Africans will tell you what's going on in their countries. That's how you begin to get first. I can't write the history of Africa if I don't talk with people. So I talk with people, I read, and I'm influenced by all of it. But it's important to know something before you go out. So the organization of the center must have classical studies, major migrations, forced dispersions, because Africans have been forced to disperse. This is why we have 100 million Africans in Brazil. 100 million black people in Brazil trace their ancestors to Africa. This is why Colombia in South America has 30% of its population. It's African. And they didn't go there to pick cotton. We picked cotton in Georgia. In Colombia, they dug in the copper mines. Their enslavement was a mining enslavement. Ours was agriculture, sugarcane, you see, and so forth. So we got to look at these dispersions. Why are people there? Why are black people in Peru? Why were black people in Baghdad in 900 AD? The first slave revolt was the revolt of the Zanj rebellion. That's why sometimes people call South Africa Azania. It comes from the Zanj rebellion, 900 AD, when the black people revolted against the Arab enslavement in Baghdad. Go look it up. It's in Google. Did y'all do Google here? I mean, you can find it. It's easy to find, right? But why, look at this. Why did we lose that knowledge? Who stole it? George James of Guyana wrote a book called Stolen Legacy, declared that the Greek knowledge was found first in Africa. In my book, The History of Africa, I've told our own stories and our own names to re-signify our ancestors and actions. We had kings, not just headmen and chiefs. That's why I say Europeans call our kings chiefs. They call their kings kings. Now, wait a minute. How are you going to do that? What's the difference? Why are you going to do it? And I'm going to tell you, that's why, look at this. We were kingdoms. We were nations. We were not tribes even. We were ethnic groups and nations. Tribe is a diminutive. Europeans are going to go around. I mean, you got, if you were talking about tribes, if you go to Russia, where I visited a year or two ago, just before the beginning of COVID, and it was very interesting. They got all kinds of people, but they don't call them tribes, they're ethnic groups. The French are an ethnic group, or a nation. The only tribes are Africa, or South American forest, maybe some people in Southeast Asia. Because they don't, the people who do the defining, they have an idea. The tribe is more primitive in their mind. Don't ever use that word. That's one of the worst things. No, they used to say European tribes, but they don't say it anymore. They used to say the German tribes. Oh, no. You know, we can't say Visigoth tribe anymore like that. They're nations, they're people, they're ethnic groups. We have to re-signify. That's part of the Afrocentric idea. That's part of why in the United States right now they have a big issue among white people. They call it critical race theory. Black people want to change everything. No, we don't want to change everything. We just want to assert our own narrative of truth. And that's important for you to do that. You don't have to accept any superiority of anybody. And nobody can be superior to you unless you accept inferiority. We need to have sections dealing with forced dispersions, the Ma'afa, as Marimba Ani says, from the Islamic and Christian intrusions into Africa. African Indians in India and Indian Africans in South Africa are other examples. The Liberian context is the perfect arena for this pivot to the future. We have learned and we can learn from it, transcending issues of ethnicity and race. One can never forget the epic and courageous return to Africa in 1822. And now, in a new moment in history, we will not forget this celebration 200 years later in 2022. It is the history that is the source of a powerful initiative, making use of the collective histories of all peoples of this magnificent country, will lend credibility to this path and this Pan-African launch for the Center for Migration and the Diaspora. What is 200 years? It is 6 generations out of the many thousands since the appearance of humans on this continent. We need to share in all African achievements and not become sectionalized and fragmented by ethnicities, so-called races and regions. Europe and Arabia cannot be our teacher in ethics and values. But both areas of the world have organized their academies. We have the Pan-Arabic and the Pan-European academies. China has organized the Confucius Institutes with the idea of promoting cultural traditions. These academies of other people have their own rules, major philosophers, academic leaders, deans of knowledge, and missions. Every one of Africa's children who left here long before the enslavement sees the continent as the source of the future. Therefore, we must have our own ideas, even as we weigh the ideas of others. We have learned and we will learn from others, but we must first taste the cooking of our own mothers. For Africans, we must overcome ethnic divisions. In the Ivory Coast, I asked an educator who was going to build a school, and I asked him why was he naming the new school after Montesquieu, who I said was a big supporter of slavery. I said, why not name it after Blyden or Sheikh Anta Diop, And he asked me, isn't Job a Senegalese? I said, yes. And Montesquieu is French. So why would you rather name your school after French races rather than the greatest African intellectual of the 20th century? Let us be clear. Voltaire, Dante, Edgar Allan Poe, Hemingway, Shakespeare, Goethe are all accepted in the Pan-European Academy, regardless of nationality. Europeans don't say, well, Shakespeare was English, so he's not an important European. Dante was Italian, so he's not important. No, I don't say that. They accept all of them. You got to do the same. Why shouldn't you claim Du Bois and Toni Morrison? Why shouldn't you claim Abdias do Nascimento from Brazil? Why shouldn't you? They're all African. This sectionalism is a dangerous thing. Why aren't there books by African scholars, African diaspora scholars in universities in Africa? I questioned the dean at the University of Yaoundé about this in Cameroon. I said, you citing all these European scholars. Where are the African American books? We got scholars. Where are the books by the African people who are writing in French in Haiti? This is a French-speaking country. Well, Haiti is a French-speaking nation, and they have a history of intellectuals. Well, where is it? That has to do with where we think and how we think. Who said that only Europeans could write this or that? To have a Center for Migration and Diaspora Studies is powerful, but it must truly teach us how to love ourselves, our traditions, our teachers, our philosophers, from the entire African world. So I share, and I know my own history is global. Our aim must be to study the interactions between humans for patterns and models of good community behavior. In my new book, Being Human Being, Transforming the Race Discourse, written with Nadav, we asserted the idea of human beingness, regardless of color, creed, gender, or class, as the key to a truly human future. Africans are a global people, and the fact that Iceland's Miss Universe in 2019 was of African heritage is a recent example of dispersion. But an older dispersion happened over the past 500 years due to our encounter with Europe. In 1441, a Portuguese ship took Africans from the Senegal River region to Lisbon to open what would become the European slave trade. I do not call it African slave trade or transatlantic slave trade or trans-Sahara slave trade. The ocean and the desert never did anything to us. That is why I say European slave trade and Arab slave trade, which predated the European dispersion of Africans. Let no one tell you that Africans started the international slave trade. Chattel slavery of others was never in Africa's history until Arabs and Europeans came to the continent. Were there African collaborators? Yes. But there will always be collaborators. You got collaborators today. During apartheid in South Africa, there were black police. But apartheid was not an African initiative. You can't blame it on the black police. In all of my studies of Africa, I have not found where African culture or African people made slavery the principal mode of production. If you got an example, tell me. The Center for Migration and Diaspora Studies must be beyond ethnicity, color, religion, language in its acceptance and analysis of the African diaspora. Yet to be beyond ethnicity and color does not mean to ignore who you are, your heritage and your tradition, but to accept the same from and for other people. The Center should be fiercely Afrocentric, grounded in classical African texts, articulating a common narrative of excellence and victory, asserting the liberation of women, while understanding a global Africa as the producer of knowledge and dedicated to resisting all forms of domination. We must accept all contribution of those who claim Africa. The great James Weldon Johnson went to the Institute of the Pacific Relations Conference in Kyoto, Japan in 1929 and spoke for us. And I'm not going to go, I got a whole list. You can read this later. I'll leave the paper. But there are all kinds of Africans all over the world doing all kinds of things. And some of them you know, some of them we have never heard of. We never didn't know the names of these people. But they have done many, many, many things. The mother of Afro-Peruvian dance is Victoria Eugenia Santa Cruz. But most people never heard of her. But she's an African woman. The founder of one of the first free areas of the Americas was Yanga, a Congolese who lived in Mexico. One of the great warriors of the 1500s and 1600s was Zumbi of Brazil. But we never heard of them, or Nani of Jamaica, the Akan woman, much like Ya Asantewa, who led her fight against the British. Dessalines, the greatest general, who defeated Napoleon's army led by Leclerc in 1804 in Haiti. Look at this. We have this history. We know these stories. The first black president in North America was not Barack Obama. The first black president was Vicente Guerrero, 1829. He was the Mexican president who terminated slavery in Mexico. But we don't know our history. In fact, one of the reasons for the great, and I'm sure the ambassador from the United States knows this, the great battle of the Alamo was because the Mexicans believed that the white Americans were going to bring slavery into Texas. And so they sent Santa Anna's army up to San Antonio to prevent the white Americans from bringing Africans from Louisiana and Arkansas into Texas and enslaving them. That's what that fact was about. How do we know this? Because Santa Anna wrote it in his journal. But this was because Mexico and Texas was a part of Mexico. And Mexico didn't have slavery. But Americans were going to bring it. He said, no, you ain't going to do that here. We can't let you do that. So, but we got to know this. Our challenges are great. But our victories are certain. Liberia will, with its wings setting sail toward a new century, can bring into being an Africa free of hierarchy and patriarchy, the parents of racism, oppression of women, brutality against numerical minorities, and classism. On this continent, the first queens in the world ruled: Sobeknefru, Hatshepsut, Cleopatra, Amenorenses, Amanashaketi, Idia, and hundreds of others. Nubia still ranks as the ancient culture with more queens than any other nation. 42 women served as queens of Nubia. On this continent, Homo sapiens first called the name of God. On this continent, we established what was edible, what was not. On this continent, we established the names of the days of the week, and we established the calendar. On this continent and in this fertile nation, we will plant the seeds of migration and diaspora studies. So we have challenges, but we have always overcome them. You are not an insular people. You are a global people. While some of you are descendants of those who spent over 200 years in America, from 1619 to 1821, and another 200 years since the Elizabeth landed in 1822, and others of you have spent 50,000 years or more on the Windward Coast. You are one people, democratic, energetic, and noble. Your nobility is unquestioned, and now you must rise again and take the new century by launching this Center for Migration and Diaspora. Thank you.
Wow. Spellbound. Extraordinary. Remarkable. That's all right. That's all right. Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's give Dr. Molefi a wall-rattling hand of applause for such moving, impactful, intellectual delivery befitting of this your Renaissance Conference. I'm thrilled. Certainly everybody in this room is thrilled. And I can almost guarantee, Dr. Ashanti, our audience at large is ecstatic at the revelation. I am so pleased. And your speech, your delivery will be subsequently analyzed beyond this conference in our country, on the radio, on the internet. We are live on ELBC radio right now. So people everywhere in this country, in Lofa County, in Maryland County, in the far-flung and inaccessible areas of our country have listened to you. I hope they will understand, what you said, but you were very clear enough. Very powerful, ladies and gentlemen. This is the essence of this conference, and it is absolutely no mistake that we brought you all the way from Philadelphia. And as chairman of the planning committee, I went through it to ensure that you came on time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Tilo. So good. You're right. We have to clean everything, collectively. I mean, I was a student here in post-war Liberia at the University of Liberia, and unfortunately, I didn't read W.E. Du Bois, The Source of Black Folks. I didn't read Zara Neale Hurston. I didn't read Native Son by Richard Wright until I went to the United States. And I was amazed, when I read Toni Morrison, The Beloved. So you are right. This center has to ensure that these books are in there so that our students can read them. Thank you very much. We will talk more about your speech, your delivery subsequently. Let me also announce the arrival of some of our guests while Dr. Molefi was delivering his very impassioned and highly intellectually driven speech. Our Senator Comini B. Wise from River G County is here. We didn't send him an official invitation, but he was going to section today, and you heard it on the radio. It's, important as he considered this University of Liberia, he turned around and came to this conference. So, Senator, please, we're glad to have you. And he's a true Pan-Africanist. You know, he was student in 1978. He became the president of the University of Liberia Student Union. And his ascendancy to the student leadership coincided with the first female presidency of Dr. Mary Antoinette Brown Sherman. So, you know, he provided, his leadership provided that bare rock as well. So, Senator, we're glad to have you here. We also have the chairman of the UR Board of Trustees, Honorable Representative Matthew Zaza. He is here. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite him to sort of respond to the delivery. And I'd like you to, both of you to come up. Dr. Mulefi, please come up back here, because this center has to be officially launched. It has to be officially launched. So you, in effect, launch it by your delivery, but you know, we have to go through the ceremony, and then Dr. Representative Matthew, you will sort of respond. So we'll call the camera so that we can do
this. I hereby launch the Center for Migration and Diaspora Studies.
My fellow members of the Board of Trustees of the University of Liberia, the President and faculty of the University of Liberia, the guest speaker, our invited guests, I didn't come here to preach another sermon. The speech that was delivered covered everything. That to Excellency, thank you very much. What is left with the board now is to work with the faculty, the administration, so that this center will be actualized. We will not soil your good speech. As I said, we are not going to deliver a speech. I've written nothing. That I am a student of your students, Abdullah Vani. He taught me African history. So when he talked about him, I knew that you were a teacher. You were his instructor. Thank you very much. Here. Originally, Africa was looked at as dark continent. Nobody knew what was going on here. So they wrote and said, a dark continent. Is this continent a dark continent? No, it's not. That was act of ignorance. Even when black man was taken to America, from what we read, they said he was not full human being. He was half human being. Is black man half human being? This is out of ignorance. It is said that education has no end. The center that we've launched today is in the rightful place. Why? Liberia has been the center for the African liberation movement. Therefore, the University of Liberia is a rightful center to establish diaspora and migration movement. Dr. Nelson, I challenge you and the faculty members, the board challenges you and the faculty members to actualize this brilliant idea to continue our role in African liberation. Yes, so many things have been said, but we must understand our history. Even in this country, when our brothers and sisters returned, our home brothers and sisters said we were not citizens until in the 30s. I mean, this is, it's out of ignorance. education is a continuous process. Dr. Ashanti, our visiting professors, I say thank you. The members of the faculty, Mr. President of the university, I say thank you, and we'll work with you to ensure that this vision is actualized. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Representative Matthew Zaza of Synod County, who is also the chair of the UL Board of Trustees. Thank you very much. One of the legacies of this international conference is certainly the establishment of the Center for Migration and Diaspora Studies. Thank you very much. Okay, we are proceeding quite well. We had a small challenge at the beginning. Nobody's going to remember that challenge now that we have heard the guest speaker and other speakers before. At this stage, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now take remarks. We have here several institutions and individuals who we've invited to proffer greetings or remarks. So we're going to make a segue now to our the first person who will bring his greetings, and that will be Mr. John L. Archibald, who is the president of the Trustees of Donation for Education in Liberia, TDL. After Trustees Archibald's remarks, we will pause the remarks and take a special selection from the UL chorus, so to simmer things down a little bit, and then we'll come back to remarks, and then, eventually adjourn this morning section, which is now into the afternoon. So, Trustee Archibald, are you ready? We are all here looking at you. You're smiling. You're ready to go. So, please, let's give Trustee Archibald a hand of applause so that he knows that we're ready to take him.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm speaking to you from Boston, Massachusetts. You do not want to be here. It's minus 10 degrees centigrade. Certainly don't need air conditioning here. I'm the president of the Trustees for Donations for Education in Liberia, a nonprofit foundation that's been supporting higher education in Liberia since 1850. Very impressed with the scope and the range of this international conference, and we're very honored to be invited. Our foundation has been supporting this university since it was founded as Liberia College in 1862. We raised the funds to construct the very first building, recruit the staff and the professors, provided the college with necessary books and teaching materials. And the college has grown and now has become the University of Liberia, and we have continued our support. One example is the undergraduate computer lab at Bendel. Our primary focus has always been the library. It has a constant need for books, computers, staff training, and other things. But we also fund student scholarships and other projects. This year, for example, we've given $53,000 US dollars for the library in scholarships, and an additional $120,000 US dollars in unrestricted funds for the university to use as it decides best. We're always looking for opportunities to assist the university as it continues to grow and to add new programs. I'm here to listen and to learn, not to lecture. My fellow trustee, Charles Newhall, is also here, and he will be participating tomorrow in the discussion, University of Liberia, the Road Ahead. Some of our other trustees may be following this conference by Zoom. We're looking forward to an interesting, fruitful, and even exciting conference. Thank you again for inviting us.
Thank you very much, Trustee. We look forward to having you here next year when we celebrate the Founders Day. You and members of your trustees. We certainly appreciate the tremendous contribution that the trustees of Donations for Education in Liberia continues to make on behalf of the University of Liberia. Also following us live are several people, but one such individual is former President Dr. Al-Hassan Conte, who is Liberia's ambassador to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It is my understanding that early this morning he was the first to log in at 9 o'clock, and we came under pressure to start this conference. So give the former president of the University of Liberia a big hand of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to shift gear a little bit and invite for special redemption the UL Chorus under the esteemed directorship of Anthony at Law Prince A. Decker. Please give the UL Chorus a hand of applause as they proceed down here. And they are in their official regalia, the colors of the University of Liberia, red, white, and blue. And they have been practicing some songs that we have not heard before. And just, I'm sure they're going to be the song version of Dr. Molefi's speech.
Good morning or good afternoon. Contemporaneous upon the event of today, which is the Founders' Day, the University of Liberia will sing the birthday song of the University of Liberia, which is the University of Liberia Road first, and then we'll do a national song, and then another song in Kru, the Klau dialect, Kabena Dana Susunate.
You may have your seat, please.
Let's please give them a big hand again. The UL Chorus, in their full representation, in their full renaissance. So we are branding the University of Liberia. So we are UL. People who went to this school in the 60s, in the 70s, and some in the 80s, tend to call this university LU. Right? And some people still do. But we are UL. We are UL. So this conference should, clearly reiterate who we are, UL Renaissance. Thank you, UL Chorus, for such a splendid performance as always. If you want more of the UL Chorus, please, we'd like to invite you next week at our commencement convocation, 102 commencement convocation, and the UL Chorus is often on remarkable display during the entire week of convocation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are fast approaching lunchtime, and we will soon go to lunch. However, we still have some important activities to conclude this section. After lunch, we will make a segue into our panel discussion, and everybody in this hall is anxiously waiting for that panel discussion. But I'd like to announce that because of a pressing engagement, the special envoy of the President of the Republic of South Africa, who is also Ambassador of South Africa to Guinea-Bissau, has to leave. So we'll ask Dr. Judith Taylor to please escort the ambassador outside as we proceed with the rest of the program. Ambassador, thank you very much for coming. Please come again. You are here, but we relish your presence this morning and now. Thank you. Please give the ambassador a round of applause as he leaves. Thank you very much. Okay. So I have the master copy. And so we will now tweak a little bit. Instead of calling Professor Foley Sarr, we will have Professor Sarr come the last. Yes. We'll have Professor Sarr come the last. He's our brother. The President of the University of Liberia opened this conference. We want the President of the University of Sierra Leone to close the morning section. So at this stage, it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Afi Odogami from Princeton Theological Seminary to bring us greetings from Princeton Theological Seminary at this international conference.
Good afternoon. President Nelson, thank you for inviting me. And I'm standing here to bring greetings from my president, Professor Craig Barnes, Princeton Theological Seminary. I know the day is already fast spent, and having listened to Dr. Asante, I do not want to give another speech, but I'm in trouble now because the president of my seminary has prepared long remarks. Please don't tell him I didn't read everything. So let me try to abridge a longer version of his presentation here, and I would like to give a copy to President Nelson. I send my best greetings to University President Julius Nelson, Jr., and the participants of this international conference. I deeply regret that my travels prevent me from joining you for this important event. But I express my appreciation to Dr. Afe Adogame, our seminary's Upson Professor of Religion and Society, for reading my speech to you. I've been asked to depict some of the events over the last 5 years at Princeton Theological Seminary, which relate to the founding of Liberia 200 years ago, and which also have profoundly impacted our seminary. As the president of our seminary in the spring of 2016, I commissioned a committee of professors and administrators to engage in a deep examination of our school's historical connections to the enslavement of people of African descent. This committee studied the relationship of the seminary's founders to slavery, the activities and writings of our professors and alumni as they pertain to slavery, the economic base of our facilities that were constructed prior to the Civil War, and the participation of our early professors and board members in the American Colonization Society. After 2 years of careful research, the scholarly committee published its report. This work uncovers the contradictions and complexities of the claims and practices of the seminary's early faculty, students, and donors. Without any effort to varnish or protect the seminary's reputation, it clearly depicts both profound moral failings and courageous acts of faithfulness to the gospel. Among the important revelations of this report are the following, and I will just cite a few. 1. When Princeton Seminary was founded in 1812, both the national culture and local community were deeply entangled economically, politically, and socially with slavery. By this time, the slave economy, though rooted in the southern states, had made its way into every aspect of life in the United States. While none of our seminary's buildings were constructed by slaves, and we never housed slaves on campus, there was no such thing as clean money. So while only 15% of the seminary's early endowment contributions came from slave owners, all of our funding came from people who somehow benefited from slavery. For example, a donor who owned a railroad may have lived in New York, but much of his wealth came from transporting cotton. Even to buy or sell a cotton shirt in Boston made one complicit with an economy driven on the back of slaves. 2, the seminary's founders had a complicated relationship to slavery, like many of their generation in the northern states. The first 3 professors of the seminary, Archibald Alexander, Samuel Miller, and Charles Hodge, all used slave labor at some point in their lives. Princeton Seminary faculty, board members, and alumni were deeply involved in the American Colonization Society, which advocated sending former slaves to Africa. Though many of its members opposed slavery in principle, they feared immediate emancipation would cause social upheaval. The society was founded in 1816 by, among others, Robert Finley, a pastor and board member of the seminary. In 1824, a local auxiliary was founded in Princeton, for which Professors Charles Hodge served as a manager, and Professors Archibald Alexander and Samuel Miller were honorary managers. The writings of Alexander and Hodge in support of the colonization movement point to the widely shared assumption of the society's leaders that blacks and whites could not live peacefully and productively in the same society. It was a profound failure of theological imagination. By 1867, the society had sent more than 13,000 people to Liberia. While today we rejoice with you in the founding of the country of Liberia, our history reveals that what we meant for evil, God used for good. So this research contains many more details I don't have time to go into here, which provides a critical reckoning with our complicated past with slavery. Significantly, our goal in launching this research was not only to confess the truth about what did happen, but also to uncover the roots of what does happen. Thus, the true motivation for slavery audit that was conducted at Princeton Theological Seminary was to discuss the ongoing legacy in racism in our seminary. This reckoning with our past means that every member of the seminary community has to own this legacy as our history and seek its redemption through a more just and equitable way of living together. There are well over 100 schools of higher education in the United States engaged in this research about our institutions, which is part of a national reckoning with how deeply grounded they are in the slave economy of the 18th and 19th centuries. They have created a new consortium called Universities Studying Slavery, which our seminary has joined. So, at its board meeting in October 2019, the seminary's trustees unanimously adopted a multi-year plan to repent for the school's relationship to slavery and to commit to tangible action to shape the future of our community of faith and scholarship in meaningful ways. Together, these responses account for over $1 million a year in expenditures from our annual operating budget. The seminary knows we can never fully pay the debt we owe to the descendants of slaves, but we can make acts of repair, which seek to redress historical wrongs and redeem our legacy of racism as we strive to be a more faithful witness to the reign of God. Among our acts of repentance are the following. Again, I will just mention 2 or 3. 1, honoring the legacy of the African American experience in the Princeton Seminary through the names of prominent campus spaces, which has included A, naming the new library after Theodore Sedgwick Wright; B, naming of the Bessing-Stocking Center for Black Church Studies; C, disassociating the name of Samuel Miller from the seminary chapel; D, establishing a board task force to develop theological principles and processes as guidelines for reviewing the names of all sites and honors on campus; E, developing a permanent historical exhibit in the Wright Library to interpret the seminary's history with slavery; 2, offering new scholarships for students who are descendants of slaves or from other historically disenfranchised communities to ensure that a seminary education is affordable and does not further contribute to the disproportionate debt burden of students from these communities. So, for instance, at any time, this means the seminary is maintaining a total of A, 30 Francis Grimke scholarship for master's degree students, which includes full tuition plus $15,000 per year in living expenses; B, 5 Peter Parish scholarships for PhD students, which includes field tuition plus $35,000 per year in living expenses. Advance scholarship and promote learning about the legacy of slavery in America and African American perspectives on faith. One of the commitments is to hire an accomplished professor of African American Christianity whose research will give critical attention to the legacy of slavery in the African experience and ecclesial life. B, continue to recruit faculty of color in all departments. C, fully fund the Betsy Stocking Church Center for Black Church Studies, including hiring a full-time director. D, highlight the seminary lectureships that focus on the African American experience, including the Yates Hansen Lecture, the Martin Luther King Jr. Lecture, and the Patria Hall Lecture. Finally, contribute to conversations in the broader academy, church, society, and world about the legacy of slavery. So these are some of what we've attempted to do. A, join the University Studying Slavery Consortium of other institutions of higher education that are conducting this research and ongoing work. B, create offerings through the Department of Continuing Education that explore the legacy of slavery in America and make the findings of the historical audit available to the broader church and academy. C, develop relationships with African American congregations and historically black colleges and universities like Howard and Lincoln universities. D, through the seminary's Faminary project, develop learning opportunities to pursue the restoration of the broken relationship between the church and the land caused by slavery and its legacy. E, in partnership with the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture and Howard University, co-sponsor a conference in Washington, D.C. on slavery and its manifold afterlives. F, in partnership with the University of Liberia, co-sponsor a conference in Liberia on the topic of the legacy of the American Colonization Society. And quite spontaneously, while we're thinking about this centenary, what we should do, we have decided to propose to the president of the University of Liberia that instead of having the Washington, D.C. conference in October and then have the Liberian conference next year, we thought that it's quite important to flow with the centenary events. And here we would like to propose to the University of Liberia, if it is possible, that we jointly host another conference in October here. So, to conclude, the Board of Trustees also established a timeline for the completion of these promises to the slavery audit, all of which should be completed by the fall of 2024. And it created an implementation committee that must report at least annually to the board regarding the seminary's progress. COVID-19 has delayed our ability to sponsor the conferences, but we hope that with the conference with you this year, it will be a good starting point. So our devotion is to continue to listen, learn, reform, and collaborate with other schools and churches, both in our country and around the world, in serving the peace-filled, just reign of Christ on earth. And we certainly look forward to future opportunities to work with the churches and schools of Liberia. May God bless this conference and the people of Liberia as you celebrate the bicentennial of your nation's founding, and may your future witness more of the unfolding of God's blessing on your people. Thank you.
So let the people of God say, Amen. Thank you very much, Professor. Okay, so we are almost there. I'd like to, just before I call Professor Sarr, the University of Liberia has had 14 past presidents, including the current president, Dr. Julius Nelson. And so it's fitting, since we're celebrating the founding of the university, we have one past president, and certainly bring us a special remark. So it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Hassan Conte, who will bring us brief remarks on behalf of past presidents of the University of Liberia. He was the 11th president of the University of Liberia. Professor Dr. Conte, please, we are listening.
Thank you very much. On behalf of all the former presidents of the University of Liberia, let me extend greetings to President Nelson and the UL faculty for blazing the trail in organizing this Founders Day International. Of Liberia. Extend felicitations of the former presidents to our distinguished guests, including Professor Molife Asante for his distinguished lecture, and including John Archibald of the Trustees of Donations for Education in Liberia. Finally, I hope that all of the messages that have been delivered today and tomorrow will help to build a greater foundation of the University of Liberia, and by extension, our dear Republic of Liberia, that we call Mama Liberia. Thank you very much, and I wish you a productive conference.
Well said. Thank you, Dr. Conte. We love you here. You are a great partner to the University of Liberia, always. At this stage, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure and singular honor to invite for special remarks Professor Fode Sarr, Vice Chancellor, University of Sierra Leone. Please rise.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Moderator, I beg to stand on existing protocols. Good afternoon, all. I want to start by thanking the administration of the University of Liberia, especially Professor Nelson, for extending an invitation to the University of Sierra Leone to join them in this memorable occasion. This visit coincides with the return-led visit of the University of Sierra Leone to the University of Liberia as a result of a visit made by the President of the University of Liberia and his team to Sierra Leone. During that visit, it was interesting when we were summoned to State House by His Excellency the President, Brigadier Retired Julius Maada Bio, that we should report immediately for the signing of an MOU with the University of Liberia. That was the first of its kind. Never in the history of any higher learning institution in Sierra Leone has an MOU been signed at State House. So that was a special one. we are given special directives by our president, that is the University of Sierra Leone and the University of Liberia, that he wants us to translate the speeches into action. And immediately after that signing, we started work, the two administrations behind the scene, to make sure that we actualize all that was contained in the MOU. That is why today we are here, a high-powered delegation. We came with all those that are responsible for decision-making in the University of Sierra Leone to make sure that we complete all the elements in the MOU. There is no say that, okay, let's draft something when we go back to Freetown, then before we start implementing. No. Everything is going to be completed here. We have the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the Frabe College, which is the oldest institution, Professor Joseph Kamara is here. The Deputy Vice Chancellor of the College of Medicine and Other Health Sciences also is here, Professor Samai. The Deputy Vice Chancellor of the Institute of Public Administration and Management, Professor Noni, is here. And we have the Dean of Postgraduate Studies in the University of Sierra Leone, Professor J.D. Ali, is also here. We have the Registrar of the University, Mrs. Olive Barry, and the Finance Director, Walter Amake, is here, and the University Librarian, Professor Conte Morgan, Mrs. Marion Conte Morgan, Associate Professor, is always also here. And we have Deans of Faculties and the Director of Policy Assurance and Strategic Planning also came with us to make sure that we cement whatever we are going to start before we leave here. So on behalf of the University of Sierra Leone, I want to say thank you to the University of Liberia, and I wish you fruitful celebrations. Thank you very much.
Good. A hand of applause for the distinguished Vice Chancellor. If the University of Sierra Leone was in Liberia, we'd be calling you President. But Vice Chancellor, I understand, is the equivalent of President. Good. Thank you very much for coming with such a high power 27-person delegation to Liberia. And I'm very confident that you are enjoying your stay. You're welcome to even stay more. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the morning section. I think we have exhausted. Let me make sure that we have exhausted all of the items on the morning section, and we are going to segue into lunch. And so at this stage, my task as the MC for this section for today is over. And I'd like to invite Ms. Jenny Jala-Colley, who is the Director of Your Relations, to come and take over. She will be the MC for the afternoon section, as well as she will provide housekeeping relative to the sumptuous lunch that is awaiting all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Chair of the Planning Committee, for such a great emceeing during the first section. Thank you very much. I mean, we can see the work is still going on, so thank you. I know you will rest after tomorrow. Thank you very much. For housekeeping, the first 6 rows in the front, please, there are protocol officers in black and white. They will direct you to your lunchroom. The second row in the back, after the first 6 rows that carry the deans and academic directors, you will join the first 5 and 6 rows to go to your lunchroom, which is on my right. Rest of our very important delegates will proceed downstairs for